Maya Patel moved through the glass corridors of sterling architecture firm like a ghost in expensive heels. The morning light reflected off the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown Chicago high-rise, creating patterns that most people never noticed. But Maya noticed everything: the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached, the way her suggestions in meetings were credited to others, the subtle shifts in body language when she entered a room. At 26, she was the youngest senior designer at Sterling, her portfolio filled with award-winning sustainable building concepts. Yet in the open-plan office, she remained invisible until someone needed to criticize. "Maya, darling," drawled Victoria Chin, the creative director's wife who'd somehow secured a position as team lead despite no formal training. "Your design for the Riverside project is a bit aggressive, don't you think? Maybe tone down the ambition?" Maya's fingers tightened on her tablet, but her voice remained steady. "The client specifically requested innovative solutions for—" "I'm sure you meant well," Victoria interrupted, her smile sharp as glass. "But perhaps stick to the technical drawings and let those with more experience handle the creative vision." Around them, other designers kept their heads down, eyes fixed on their screens. Maya recognized the dance. Nobody wanted to become the next target. Her mentor's voice echoed in her mind. "Walk with your spine straight, even when they try to bend you." So she did, returning to her desk with measured steps, ignoring the smirks from Brandon Chen and his fraternity of junior architects who clustered around Victoria's desk like planets orbiting a toxic sun. That evening, Maya stayed late finishing the Riverside revisions. The office had emptied except for the cleaning crew and the perpetual glow of computer screens. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear the footsteps until Brandon's voice cut through her concentration. "Still here, Patel? Trying to prove you belong?" She didn't look up. "Just finishing my work." "Your work?" He laughed, leaning against her desk. "You mean the work we'll have to fix tomorrow when the client realizes you don't understand American architecture?" Maya's jaw clenched, but she saved her file and shut down her computer with deliberate calm. At home, in her small apartment in Pilsen, she opened her journal, a habit inherited from her grandmother who'd immigrated from Mumbai decades ago. "Today they tried again," she wrote. "Victoria dismissed my Riverside design in front of the entire team. Brandon suggested I don't understand American architecture, as if sustainable design has a nationality. But Nanny taught me that bamboo bends in the storm and remains unbroken. I will remember that." She closed the journal and walked to her window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, a forest of buildings, each one designed by someone who'd faced their own battles to leave their mark on the city. One day, she whispered to her reflection, "They'll see what I've built." The Sterling architecture firm's annual gala was the industry event of the season. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom of the Palmer House, and Chicago's architectural elite mingled beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed a century of history. Maya stood near the presentation area, her black dress simple and elegant, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She'd been working for months on the Wellington Tower proposal, a mixed-use building that would incorporate green spaces, solar technology, and community areas in a historically underserved neighborhood. The presentation was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Her portfolio sat ready on the display table, her scale model carefully positioned under protective lighting. Brandon and his crew Tyler, Marcus, and Josh lounged near the bar, their tuxedos crisp, their laughter too loud. Victoria held court nearby, her red dress commanding attention, her husband James Sterling watching with paternal indulgence. Maya checked her phone, 7:45 p.m. 15 minutes, she turned to review her notes one final time when something cold and wet splashed across the back of her head. Red wine dripped down her neck, soaking into her dress and spreading across her carefully prepared presentation boards. The ballroom fell silent. "Oh my God," Victoria's voice carried across the space, dripping with false concern. "I'm so sorry. You just moved so suddenly," she trailed off, her hand over her mouth in mock horror. Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous at first, then more confident. Maya stood frozen, wine dripping from her hair, staining her dress, ruining months of work. Brandon stepped forward, phone already recording. "Looks like someone's presentation just got diluted." Maya's hands trembled as she reached for the ruined boards. The carefully rendered drawings were bleeding red, the model's delicate features smeared and destroyed. Something shifted in her expression, subtle, invisible to those who weren't watching closely. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted. Her eyes turned to steel. What Brandon and Victoria didn't know was that beneath her wine-stained dress, Maya wore a silver bracelet, a gift from her mentor, Master Chen, who'd taught her Wing Chun for the past 15 years. The inscription read, "Stillness before the storm." Maya turned slowly to face Victoria, her movements controlled and precise. "You're right," she said quietly. "That was clumsy." She began gathering the ruined materials, her motions deliberate. As she bent to retrieve a fallen board, Brandon moved closer, his phone camera focused on her humiliation. "What are you going to do now, Patel? Cry? Run home?" Tyler pushed past her, knocking her portfolio to the floor. papers scattered across the polished marble. Oops. Guess you're just clumsy all around. Maya straightened, and in that moment, her entire demeanor changed. Years of Wing Chun training had taught her to read intention before action, to feel the shift in energy that preceded aggression. When Marcus reached out to shove her again, she wasn't there. Her movement was so fluid it seemed impossible. She sidestepped, and Marcus stumbled forward, off balance. Before anyone could process what happened, Tyler lunged at her from the side. Maya's training took over. Block. Redirect. Control. Tyler's momentum carried him past her, and a quick sweep of her leg sent him sprawling into a decorative plant. Marcus tried to grab her arm, but she twisted free with a simple joint lock, applying just enough pressure to make him release her without causing injury. The ballroom erupted in gasps and shouts. Phones appeared everywhere, recording as Brandon charged forward with a roar of rage. Maya stood centered, balanced, her ruined dress clinging to her frame but her posture unwavering. She caught Brandon's wild punch, redirected it with a circular motion, and used his own force to send him stumbling into an empty table. That's enough. James Sterling's voice boomed across the ballroom. But it was too late. The damage was done, the truth exposed, and every moment had been captured on dozens of cameras. The wine-stained ballroom had transformed into a battleground of public opinion. Videos of the confrontation spread across social media within minutes, each platform hosting different angles, different narratives. Architecture student loses control at industry. Gala designer attacks colleagues in unprovoked assault. Violent outburst at Sterling. Architecture showcase. The headlines multiplied faster than Maya could read them, each one twisting the truth into something unrecognizable. Monday morning, she sat in James Sterling's corner office, the Chicago skyline stretching behind him like a judgment. The leather chair was stiff, the air conditioning too cold, and Sterling's expression held all the warmth of winter steel. Miss Patel, he began, his fingers steepled on the mahogany desk. Do you understand the severity of what happened Friday evening? Before Maya could respond, the door opened. Brandon limped in, followed by Tyler and Marcus. Brandon's nose was wrapped in gauze, theatrical, considering Maya had never actually struck his face. Tyler wore a neck brace that seemed entirely unnecessary. Sit down, gentlemen, Sterling said softly, his tone gentler than the one he'd used with Maya. You're safe here. Brandon sank into a chair with exaggerated pain. I still can't believe she attacked us like that. We were just congratulating her on her presentation, and she snapped. Congratulating? Maya's voice was quiet but firm. You destroyed my work after Victoria poured wine on me deliberately. Now, Maya, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her expression dripping with sympathy. I explained that was an accident. But your violent response. She shook her head sadly. That was calculated aggression. Sterling pulled out a document, his signature already at the bottom. Miss Patel, given your display of violence and the trauma you've caused these young men, I'm terminating your employment effective immediately. Sterling Architecture has a zero-tolerance policy for workplace violence. Workplace violence? The words tasted like acid. They sabotaged my presentation, attacked me in front of witnesses, and I'm the one being fired? The video evidence is quite clear, Sterling said, though Maya noticed he hadn't actually shown her any footage. You used martial arts training to assault your colleagues. We cannot tolerate such behavior. Tyler whimpered dramatically. I'm afraid to even be in the same room with her. Maya stared at the three men who'd orchestrated this moment, who now played victims with Oscar-worthy performances. Brandon's smirk was carefully hidden behind his bandage, but she could see it in his eyes, the triumph of someone who'd gotten exactly what they wanted. Sign the termination papers, Miss Patel, Sterling said, sliding them across the desk. Consider yourself fortunate we're not pressing charges. With a steady hand that betrayed none of her inner turmoil, Maya signed. She stood, dignity intact despite the injustice crushing her chest. This isn't right, she said softly. Right or wrong, Sterling replied coldly, it's done. That evening, Maya sat at her grandmother's kitchen table in Edison Park. Nanny's weathered hands prepared chai, the familiar scent of cardamom and ginger filling the small house. They made me the villain, Nanny, Maya said, her voice finally cracking. I defended myself, and they turned it into assault. Her grandmother set down 2 steaming cups and took Maya's hands in her own. Then show them the truth, Beta. Show them what real strength looks like. The next morning, Maya called an emergency meeting with the few people she trusted. Professor Sarah Kim from the University of Illinois, who'd been her thesis advisor. Detective Luis Ramirez, an old family friend who'd helped her father years ago. And Alex Chen, a tech journalist who'd been quietly documenting industry discrimination for years. They gathered in Maya's apartment, spreading evidence across her coffee table like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. I have recordings, Alex said, pulling out his laptop. Not from the gala, from the office. Sterling's systems aren't as secure as they think. The recordings played, Victoria and Brandon planning the wine incident 3 days before the gala. James Sterling discussing how to handle the diversity problem with his legal team. Messages showing a pattern of targeting minority designers, documenting their inevitable failures, and replacing them with more culturally appropriate candidates. Professor Kim examined the communications with mounting anger. This isn't just harassment, this is systematic discrimination. They've been doing this for years. Detective Ramirez made notes, his expression grim. The wine attack, the destroyed presentation, that's destruction of property and assault, but they've been clever about covering their tracks. Until now, Alex said, pulling up another file. They didn't know about the security camera in the supply room. Watch this. The footage showed Brandon and his crew preparing for the gala attack. They practiced their timing, discussed how to edit videos afterward, and most damning of all, showed Victoria testing the trajectory of her wine throw on a mannequin wearing a dress similar to Maya's. Premeditated, Ramirez said quietly. Everything. Maya stared at the evidence, feeling the weight of betrayal but also something else, determination. They wanted to break me. Let's show them what happens when you try to demolish the wrong architect. The converted warehouse space in West Loop hummed with quiet intensity. Maya stood before her drafting table, not designing buildings this time, but constructing something more important, a plan for exposure, for truth, for justice that couldn't be swept under corporate carpets. Around her, the team worked with focused purpose. Professor Kim coordinated with the Illinois Civil Rights Commission, her legal background proving invaluable. Alex Chin compiled media packages, ensuring every news outlet in Chicago would receive documented proof simultaneously. Detective Ramirez verified evidence chains, making sure everything would hold up under legal scrutiny. The key is timing, Maya said, spreading architectural drawings across the table, not for buildings, but for their strategy. Sterling is hosting the Wellington Tower groundbreaking ceremony next Friday. The mayor will be there, city council members, investors. Maximum visibility. Alex looked up from his laptop. I've confirmed that 3 major news networks will cover it. If we release our evidence during the ceremony, they won't be able to control the narrative, Professor Kim finished. Not with live cameras running. Maya's phone buzzed. A message from an unexpected source, Jennifer Park, a junior designer from Sterling who'd always kept her head down. I have more evidence. Can we meet? That afternoon, Maya and Professor Kim sat in a coffee shop in Andersonville, watching Jennifer nervously stir her latte. The young designer looked exhausted, shadows under her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. I should have spoken up sooner, Jennifer said quietly. But I was scared. My student loans, my visa status, I couldn't risk losing my job. You're risking it now, Maya said gently. Why? Jennifer pulled out a folder, opening it to reveal dozens of printed emails. Because what they did to you, they've done to others. 6 designers in the past 3 years, all women, all people of color. Same pattern, public humiliation, manufactured incidents, forced resignations. The evidence was damning. Email chains showing Sterling and Victoria coordinating each targeting, discussing how to document performance issues, planning incidents that would justify terminations. One email from Sterling made Maya's blood run cold. The industry isn't ready for too much diversity. We need to maintain our firm's traditional image. Traditional image, Maya repeated, the phrase heavy with coded meaning. They mean white. Professor Kim photographed each document methodically. This establishes pattern and practice. Combined with your evidence, Jennifer's testimony, and the security footage, Sterling architecture won't survive this. But Jennifer shook her head. It's bigger than Sterling. Look at the CC list on these emails. Partners from 6 other major firms. They've been coordinating across the industry, sharing problem employee lists. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. An entire network of firms working together to maintain demographic control, to push out anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of what an architect should look like. We need to expose all of it, Maya said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. Not just Sterling, the entire system. That night, Maya stood in her apartment, looking at the mood board she'd created. Not for a building, but for their revelation strategy. Sticky notes mapped out timing, media contacts, legal filings, and public statements. It looked like the complex workflow for a major construction project, because in a way, it was they were building a case that couldn't be demolished. Her phone rang. Master Chen, her Wing Chun instructor, calling from his dojo in Chinatown. Maya, his voice was calm, centered. Your grandmother told me what happened. Are you prepared for what comes next? I think so, Sifu. We have evidence, witnesses, a plan. I'm not asking about evidence, he interrupted gently. I'm asking about you. When you strike, strike with purpose. When you defend, defend with honor. But most importantly, know why you fight. Maya looked at her reflection in the window, the Chicago skyline glittering behind her. I fight so the next person doesn't have to. So the next Maya Patel can walk into Sterling Architecture or any firm and be seen for her talent, not her skin color or her name. Then you're ready, Master Chin said. Remember your training. The strongest defense is unwavering truth. Friday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather, the kind of perfect spring day that made Chicago residents forget the brutal winter. The Wellington Tower construction site had been transformed into an event space, with white tents, folding chairs, and a stage where Mayor Johnson would officiate the groundbreaking ceremony. Maya arrived early, dressed professionally in a navy suit, her credentials identifying her as a representative from the Illinois Civil Rights Commission courtesy of Professor Kim's connections. She wore a small lapel camera, as did Alex Chin, who'd positioned himself among the legitimate press corps. The site filled quickly. Sterling stood near the stage, pressing flesh with investors and politicians. Victoria worked the crowd, her red power suit visible from across the space. Brandon and his crew lurked near the refreshment tables, phones ready to capture and spin whatever happened. What they didn't know was that Jennifer had spent the past 3 days reaching out to other former Sterling employees. Former designers who'd been pushed out, marginalized, or silenced. And they were all here, scattered through the crowd, each wearing the same discreet blue ribbon, a signal of solidarity. At 11 o'clock, the ceremony began. Mayor Johnson took the stage, praising Sterling Architecture's commitment to community development and architectural excellence. Sterling followed with his prepared remarks about building the future of Chicago. Then came the moment for the presentation of the Wellington Tower design. Sterling pressed the remote for the video screen, expecting to see renderings of the approved design, a generic glass tower with minimal green space, maximum profit margin. Instead, Alex's hack activated. The screen showed a split image. On one side, Maya's original sustainable design for Wellington Tower with its community spaces and environmental innovations. On the other side, Sterling's stripped-down version that had replaced it. Sterling's face flushed red. Technical difficulties, he said quickly, reaching for the remote, but the video continued, now showing the emails Jennifer had provided. Conversations about excluding problematic designers. Messages coordinating the Gala attack. Security footage of Brandon preparing his ambush. Most damning of all, the network of firms sharing blacklists of minority architects. The crowd murmured, then erupted. Journalists surged forward. Cameras swung from the stage to Sterling's panicking face. This is fabricated. Victoria shouted, pushing toward the stage. Someone hacked our systems. Actually, Professor Kim's voice rang out clear and authoritative as she stood. Everything you just saw has been authenticated and submitted to the Illinois Civil Rights Commission, the Chicago Bar Association, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Copies have also been provided to every media outlet present. Sterling's face went from red to white. You can't. This is corporate espionage. No, Maya said, standing and facing him directly across the crowded space. This is transparency. This is accountability. This is what happens when you try to demolish people instead of buildings. Brandon pushed forward, his phone camera aimed at Maya. You're just bitter because you weren't good enough. You attacked us, remember? Everyone saw it. Alex stepped forward, his journalist credentials visible. Everyone saw edited footage. Let's show them what really happened. Another click, and the screens displayed the unedited security footage from the gala. The wine attack, the destroyed presentation, Brandon and his crew coordinating their assault, Victoria's calculated cruelty. Then, Maya's perfect defensive responses, never striking first, never using more force than necessary, always controlled. The video also showed something the edited versions had carefully removed. Victoria and James Sterling watching from the sidelines, neither intervening, both clearly complicit in the orchestrated humiliation. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one person began clapping. Jennifer Park, standing near the front, applauded Maya's restraint, her skill, her refusal to break. Others joined, first the people wearing blue ribbons, then journalists, then even some of Sterling's own investors who were rapidly calculating the financial and reputational damage. I've seen enough, Mayor Johnson said from the stage, his expression granite. Mr. Sterling, consider any city contracts under immediate review. And I'll be calling for a full investigation into these allegations. The aftermath moved swiftly, like a controlled demolition. Within 48 hours, Sterling Architecture's board forced James Sterling to resign. Victoria found herself unemployed and facing multiple civil suits. Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus were terminated and, along with Victoria, charged with assault and conspiracy, but the exposure reached further than one firm. The email network Jennifer had uncovered led to investigations across the Chicago architectural community. 6 firms faced discrimination lawsuits. 2 senior partners resigned. The Illinois Architecture Licensing Board launched a comprehensive review of industry practices. Maya sat in Professor Kim's university office 2 weeks later, surrounded by legal documents and settlement offers. Sterling Architecture's board had offered her a substantial payment to quietly resolve her case. They're afraid of a trial, Professor Kim explained. Public testimony about systematic discrimination would destroy what's left of the firm's reputation. But this isn't just about you anymore. Maya looked at the settlement figure, enough to pay off her student loans, set up her own practice, ensure financial security. Tempting. What happens to the others if I settle quietly, she asked. They'll each have to fight their own battles. Your case is the strongest, the most publicized. If you settle, the narrative becomes about one bad incident, not systematic discrimination. Maya set down the papers. No settlement. We go public, we document everything, and we make sure this can't happen to the next person. Professor Kim smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 months later, Maya stood in a sun-filled loft space in Pilsen, looking at the sign being installed on the window. Patel Design Collective Architecture for Community. The space was modest but full of potential. Drafting tables lined the exposed brick walls. Computers hummed with design software. And seated at those tables were Jennifer Park, 2 other former Sterling designers, and 3 recent graduates who'd heard about Maya's fight and wanted to work with someone who'd proven that integrity mattered more than corporate approval. We're really doing this, Jennifer said, looking around with wonder. Our own firm. Our own rules, Maya corrected. Where talent matters more than demographics, where sustainable design isn't sacrificed for profit margins, and where every voice is heard. The doorbell chimed, and Master Chen entered, carrying a carefully wrapped package. He bowed slightly to Maya, who returned the gesture with deep respect. A gift for your new beginning, he said. Presenting the package, Maya unwrapped it carefully, revealing a framed piece of reclaimed wood from a demolished Chicago building. Master Chen had burned characters into the wood in elegant calligraphy. Truth is the strongest foundation. Hang this where you can see it every day, Master Chen said. Remember that buildings fall, careers end, reputations change. But truth and honor, these remain. The frame found its place on the wall, visible from every workstation in the office. That afternoon, Maya's first official client arrived. A community organization from Little Village, looking for someone to design an affordable housing complex with green spaces and community gathering areas, exactly the kind of project Sterling would have dismissed as insufficiently profitable. As Maya spread her preliminary sketches across the table, explaining how sustainable design could serve both people and planet, she felt a completeness she'd never experienced at Sterling. This was why she'd become an architect, not to design monuments to corporate wealth, but to build spaces where communities could thrive. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. The final settlements from the Sterling case had been reached. James Sterling had been permanently barred from practicing architecture in Illinois. Victoria faced 5 years of probation. Brandon and his crew had pleaded guilty to assault charges, accepting suspended sentences and mandatory community service, but more importantly, the Sterling architecture firm had been restructured. The board had appointed Dr. Michelle Rodriguez as CEO, the first woman of color to lead a major Chicago architecture firm. She'd immediately announced new diversity initiatives, transparent hiring practices, and a commitment to sustainable design. Everything okay? Jennifer asked, noticing Maya's expression. Yeah, Maya replied, setting down her phone. Just realizing that sometimes you have to tear down the old structure before you can build something better. 6 months after opening Patel Design Collective, Maya stood in the completed community center she designed for Little Village. Sunlight streamed through the solar panel skylights, illuminating the gathering space where local families celebrated the building's opening. Children played in the courtyard garden Maya had positioned at the building's heart. Seniors gathered in the shaded seating areas. The building breathed and lived, serving its community rather than dominating it. Mayor Johnson approached, accompanied by a small crowd of city officials. Miss Patel, he said, extending his hand. This is exactly what Chicago needs. Affordable, sustainable, community-centered design. I'd like to discuss several city projects that could benefit from your approach. As Maya outlined her vision for transforming vacant lots into community assets, she noticed a group of young people watching from nearby. College students, judging by their architecture portfolio bags and the way they examined every detail of the building. One young woman, wearing a hijab and carrying a well-worn sketchbook, approached hesitantly. Miss Patel? I'm Aisha Rahman. I'm a sophomore at UIC, studying architecture. I just wanted to say what you did, standing up to Sterling, showing that we belong in this field. Her voice caught. It matters. It matters so much. Maya smiled, remembering her own college days, the isolation of being different, the constant need to prove herself. You belong here, Aisha. Not because of anything I did, but because architecture needs your vision, your perspective, your voice. Aisha's eyes shone with tears. Would it be possible to intern with your firm? I know you're small, and you probably don't have the resources, but I would work for free, just to learn we don't do free labor, Maya interrupted gently. Exploitation is what we fought against, remember? But yes, we're looking for interns. Paid interns. Submit your portfolio to Jennifer, that's her over there, and we'll review it properly. As Aisha hurried off, practically glowing with excitement, Master Chen appeared beside Maya. He'd been observing from the shadows, as was his way. You've become a teacher, he noted. Not just of design, but of strength. I had a good example, Maya replied, bowing her head respectfully to her sifu. The true test of martial arts, Master Chen said, isn't in defeating your opponent. It's in what you build after the battle ends. You passed that test. That evening, Maya's collective gathered in their office for their weekly team meeting. The space had grown, more designers, more projects, more evidence that doing the right thing could also be commercially successful. Jennifer presented their latest commission, a proposal for renovating historic buildings in Bronzeville, preserving cultural heritage while creating affordable housing. Another designer, Michael Kim, showed sustainable redesigns for 3 Chicago public schools, transforming them into community hubs that served families year-round. We're getting noticed, Jennifer said, pulling up recent press coverage. Architecture Digest wants to feature us. The AIA is discussing our work at their national conference. We're being held up as a model for how firms should operate. Maya looked around at her team, diverse in background, unified in purpose, each person here because of their talent and vision rather than despite their identity. Remember why we exist, she said quietly. Not for recognition or profit, though those are nice. We exist because the old system failed. Because too many talented people were pushed out, silenced, or forced to compromise their integrity to survive. We're proof that there's another way. Also, Michael added with a grin, we're proof that you really shouldn't mess with someone who has 15 years of Wing Chun training. The room erupted in laughter, but Maya shook her head, smiling. The martial arts didn't save me. The training taught me control, but what really mattered was having people who believed in me. Nanny, Master Chen, Professor Kim, all of you. We're stronger together than any of us could be alone. As the meeting wrapped up and the team filtered out into the Chicago evening, Maya stood alone in the office, looking at the framed wood on the wall. Truth is the strongest foundation. She thought about everything that had happened: the harassment, the wine-stained gala, the fight, the firing, the exposure, the rebuilding. Each moment had felt overwhelming at the time, but looking back, she could see the pattern. Not a random series of attacks and victories, but a structure. A design. Like any good building, her journey had required strong foundations, careful planning, and the willingness to tear down what wasn't working to build something better. Her phone buzzed with a message from Aisha, the young woman from the community center opening. Thank you for showing us we can do this. My application is submitted. Whatever happens, you changed everything for me, Maya smiled, typing back, you were always capable. I just held the door open. Now you get to help hold it for the next person. She turned off the office lights and headed home, walking through Chicago's streets with the same measured steps she'd always used. But now, people recognized her. Some nodded in respect. Others smiled in solidarity. And a few particularly young women of color looked at her with something more precious than admiration. They looked at her with hope. 1 year later, Patel Design Collective had outgrown their Pilsen loft. The new office occupied 3 floors of a building Maya's firm had redesigned. A formerly abandoned factory transformed into affordable creative workspace. The office walls were covered not just with design awards, though those had multiplied, but with photographs from completed projects. The little village community center bustling with life. The Bronzeville housing complex preserving history while serving modern needs. The Chicago public schools transformed into vibrant educational hubs, and there, in a place of honor, hung the broken board from Master Chen's dojo. Fear split cleanly in two, a reminder that what seemed unbreakable could always be overcome. Maya stood at the window of her private office, looking out at the Chicago skyline, a forest of buildings, each one representing someone's vision, someone's dream, someone's mark on the city. Her mark was there now, too. Multiple buildings bearing the signature of Patel Design Collective, each one built on the foundation of truth, integrity, and the radical belief that architecture should serve people rather than profit. A knock on her door, and Jennifer entered with a nervous-looking young man, dark-skinned, probably early 20s, wearing a worn suit that suggested he'd borrowed it for this meeting. Maya, this is Marcus Thompson. He just graduated from Howard University. He's designed an incredible proposal for affordable housing in Englewood, but... Jennifer trailed off. But no one will look at it because of my background, Marcus finished quietly. I have a record, got caught up in some stuff when I was younger. Did my time, turned my life around, got my degree. But every firm sees my application and sits down. Marcus, Maya interrupted gently. Show me your work. As Marcus spread his portfolio across the table, Maya saw the familiar mixture of hope and fear in his eyes. The expectation of rejection, the desperate need for someone to see past the surface to the talent beneath. His designs were raw but brilliant, sustainable architecture that understood the communities it served, that recognized the dignity and potential of neighborhoods others had written off. This is excellent work, Maya said simply. Jennifer, process Marcus's hiring paperwork. We need someone with his perspective on the Englewood project. Marcus stared at her, disbelieving. Just like that? You don't want to check my references, or, I'm looking at your references, Maya gestured to his portfolio. This is what matters. The rest is just noise from people who judge potential by the wrong metrics. After Marcus left, nearly floating with relief and joy, Jennifer lingered in the doorway. You know the board will have questions. Some of our investors might push back on hiring someone with his background. Maya smiled, the same smile she'd worn when facing down Sterling and his corruption. Then we'll find investors who share our values. We didn't build this firm by playing it safe, Jennifer. We built it by recognizing that talent exists everywhere, even in the places others refuse to look. Truth is foundation, Jennifer said, nodding to the framed wood on the wall. Always, Maya agreed. That night, Maya returned to her grandmother's house in Edison Park for their weekly dinner. Nanny had aged visibly over the past year. The stress of watching her granddaughter fight such a public battle had taken its toll, but her eyes remained sharp and filled with pride. You've built something good, Beta, Nanny said, ladling curry onto Maya's plate. Not just buildings. A community. A movement. I just opened a door that others held closed, Maya replied. The real work is making sure it stays open. That's the challenge of every generation, Nanny observed. Your grandfather and I opened doors for your father. He opened doors for you. Now you open doors for Marcus and Aisha and all the others. Each generation builds on the foundation the previous one laid. Maya thought about that as she ate, considering the long chain of struggle and progress, of people who'd fought so that the next generation could stand a little taller, build a little higher, dream a little bigger. Later, she drove to Master Chen's dojo in Chinatown. The evening class was in session, 20 students moving through forms with varying degrees of skill. Master Chen stood at the front, his movements still precise despite his 70 years, demonstrating the same techniques he'd taught Maya 15 years ago. After class, Maya and Master Chen shared tea in his small office, surrounded by decades of memories and ancient wisdom. Sifu, Maya said quietly, sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Going public, exposing Sterling, choosing confrontation over silence. I secured my own success, but the industry still has so much work to do. Did I really change anything? Master Chen sipped his tea thoughtfully before responding. Tell me, Maya. How many young architects contacted you this month, asking for advice or mentorship? 73, Maya admitted. From all over the country. And how many firms have changed their hiring practices since your case became public? The last count was 42, implementing new diversity policies and transparency measures. And how many buildings will be designed by people who would have been pushed out if you'd stayed silent? Maya paused, considering. I don't know. Hundreds, maybe thousands over the coming years. Then you changed everything, Master Chen said simply. Not because you're special or because you have magic powers. You changed everything because you refused to break when they tried to break you. You showed others that the system could be challenged, that justice was possible, that truth was worth fighting for. He set down his teacup and looked at her with those wise, penetrating eyes. In Wing Chun, we teach that the strongest fighter is not the one who never gets hit. It's the one who absorbs the blow, maintains their center, and continues forward. You did that. And in doing so, you became a teacher not just of architecture, but of resilience. Maya bowed her head in gratitude. Thank you, Sifu. For everything you taught me. I taught you how to stand. You taught yourself how to rise. 2 years after the Sterling exposure, Maya stood before a packed auditorium at the American Institute of Architects National Conference in San Francisco. The room held over 1,000 architects, designers, and students, a sea of faces watching her take the podium. She'd been invited to give the keynote address on ethics and integrity in modern architecture, a topic that would have seemed ironic just a few years ago. Now, her name was synonymous with both. I didn't set out to become an activist, Maya began, her voice steady as she looked across the crowd. I just wanted to design buildings. Beautiful, sustainable structures that served their communities and honored the earth. But I learned something important: you cannot build with integrity on a foundation of injustice. She clicked to the first slide, a photo of the little village community center, children playing in the courtyard garden, sunlight streaming through the solar panels. This building exists because I refused to stay silent. Because people like Professor Sarah Kim, Detective Luis Ramirez, Alex Chen, and Jennifer Park stood with me when standing alone would have been easier. Because my grandmother taught me that dignity is non-negotiable, and my Sifu taught me that true strength is control, not violence. Another click. The wine-stained gala photo, her standing in her ruined dress, facing down her attackers with unwavering composure. This moment went viral. People called me the fighting architect, the designer who struck back. But that misses the point entirely. I didn't win because I could fight. I won because I understood what was worth fighting for. She saw nodding heads in the audience. Some people wiping tears. A group of young women of color in the front row leaning forward, hanging on every word. Since that night, I've been asked hundreds of times, how did you stay so calm? How did you maintain control? The answer is training 15 years of martial arts discipline. But more than that, it was clarity. I knew that if I responded with the violence they expected, I would confirm every stereotype they'd projected onto me. So instead, I responded with precision, with control, with the exact amount of force needed to protect myself and no more. Click. The courtroom photo from the civil rights case, Maya testifying while Sterling's lawyers looked increasingly desperate. The legal battle lasted 18 months. They tried everything: character assassination, victim blaming, manufactured evidence. But truth, when properly documented and courageously defended, is undefeatable. Sterling Architecture paid settlements to 14 former employees. James Sterling lost his license. Victoria Chen and 3 of her conspirators faced criminal charges. A pause, letting that sink in. But punishment isn't the same as justice. Justice is what happens next. Justice is the 47 architecture firms across the country that have implemented transparent hiring practices and diversity initiatives. Justice is the 200-plus young architects of color who contacted me to say they're staying in the profession because they saw someone who looked like them refuse to be pushed out. Justice is Marcus Thompson, who now works at my firm and just won an AIA award for his Englewood affordable housing design. The applause started then, building to a standing ovation. Maya waited for it to settle before continuing. I stand here not as someone special, but as someone ordinary who was pushed to an extraordinary moment. Each of you in this room will face your own moments of choice. When you see injustice, will you speak up or stay silent? When you see a colleague being targeted, will you intervene or look away? When your firm prioritizes profit over people or aesthetics over sustainability, will you challenge that or accept it? She clicked to her final slide, a photo of Patel Design Collective's entire team, 15 people of diverse backgrounds, standing together in front of their latest completed project. This is my answer. This is what choosing integrity looks like. Not perfect, not without challenges, but built on a foundation that won't crumble. We design buildings that serve communities. We hire based on talent, not demographics. We prove every day that doing the right thing and running a successful business aren't mutually exclusive. She stepped back from the podium, her voice softening but somehow becoming more powerful. I was the quiet architect they underestimated. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought my composure was fear. They were wrong. And every person in this room who has ever been underestimated, dismissed, or targeted, you are not weak. You are not less than. You are exactly what this profession needs. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. As Maya left the stage, dozens of people crowded around, wanting to shake her hand, share their own stories, thank her for speaking truth to power, but what struck her most was the young woman waiting patiently at the edge of the crowd. Aisha Rahman, now in her senior year at UIC, wearing a Patel Design Collective intern badge with obvious pride. You did it, Aisha said, her eyes shining. You changed everything. Maya shook her head gently. No, Aisha. We did it. And we're not done yet. 3 years after founding Patel Design Collective, Maya received an unexpected call. The University of Illinois wanted to establish an endowed chair in ethical architecture and social justice, and they wanted to name it after her. She sat in her office, phone in hand, staring at the Chicago skyline and thinking about what that meant. Her name permanently attached to an academic position, teaching future generations about the principles she'd fought for. It's a significant honor, Dean Patricia Morrison said over the phone. Your case changed the conversation in architecture schools nationwide. We want to ensure that conversation continues. Maya accepted, with one condition: half the endowment funding would go towards scholarships for architecture students from underrepresented backgrounds. The dean agreed immediately. The following semester, Maya began teaching a once-weekly seminar at UIC while maintaining her practice. 25 students filled her classroom, a rainbow of faces, backgrounds, and perspectives that would have been impossible in the architecture programs of previous decades. The first day, Maya stood before them without notes or presentations, just herself and her story. This class is called Ethics in Architecture and Urban Design, she began. But what we're really going to explore is power, who has it, how it's used, and what happens when it's challenged. I'm not here to give you easy answers or simple formulas. I'm here to prepare you for the reality of this profession. A hand raised. Carlos Martinez, a first-generation college student from Pilsen. Professor Patel, everyone knows your story. The gala, the fight, the lawsuit. But what do we do if we face something similar? Not everyone can afford to lose their job and start their own firm. It was the question Maya had been waiting for, the one that mattered most. You're right, Carlos. I had advantages many people don't have. I had savings, family support, a mentor network, and skills that made me employable even after being fired. Not everyone has those resources. She sat on the edge of her desk, making the space less formal, more conversational. But here's what everyone does have: documentation. The first thing I tell young architects is document everything. Keep copies of your work, save emails, record patterns of discrimination or harassment. Alex Chin taught me that evidence is armor. You might never need it, but if you do, it's invaluable. Second, build community. Jennifer Park reached out to me with evidence because she knew she wasn't alone. Find your people, colleagues who share your values, mentors who have survived similar battles, organizations that fight for worker rights. Isolation is what allows abuse to continue. Another student, Mia noticed Lakshmi Devi, raised her hand. But what about international students? We can't risk our visa status. If we speak up and get fired, we get deported. Maya nodded, acknowledging the painful truth. That's why systemic change requires those of us with privilege to use it. I'm a citizen. I couldn't be deported. That gave me freedom to fight that others don't have. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. You can document anonymously, you can support others who can speak up more safely, you can choose which firms you work for based on their track record. She stood, walking among the desks. The architecture industry, like most industries, has been built on exploitation. Unpaid internships that only wealthy students can afford. Grueling hours that favor people without family responsibilities. Cultural fit hiring that maintains demographic homogeneity. We're not going to fix all of that in one semester. But each of you will leave here understanding how these systems work and having tools to challenge them. Over the following weeks, the class examined case studies, not just Maya's story, but dozens of others. They studied the Zaha Hadid case, examining how gender bias shaped critical reception of her work. They analyzed the Vincent Harding incident, where a black architect's designs were consistently attributed to white colleagues. They reviewed the UCLA architecture school discrimination suit and the changes it forced. Pattern recognition, Maya told them. That's what you're developing. The ability to see when mistreatment isn't personal failure but systemic design. When you're not being difficult, the system is being discriminatory. For their final project, students had to design both a building and a strategy for ethical practice. Not just what they would create, but how they would create it: fair labor practices, sustainable materials, community input, transparent contracting. Aisha Rahman, now hired full-time at Patel Design Collective after graduating, presented a community center for refugee families that incorporated design elements from multiple cultures while meeting Chicago's strictest environmental standards. Her ethics component included profit sharing with contractors, hiring refugees as consultants, and committing to carbon-neutral construction. This is what the next generation looks like, Maya told her class as Aisha finished her presentation. Not just designers who know how to draw beautiful buildings, but architects who understand that every line we draw has ethical implications. 5 years after the Sterling architecture scandal, Maya stood in her firm's conference room, surrounded by her partners Jennifer Park, Marcus Thompson, and Aisha Rahman had all become equity stakeholders in what was now a 30-person firm with offices in Chicago and Detroit. They were reviewing proposals for their most ambitious project yet, redesigning an entire Chicago neighborhood destroyed by decades of disinvestment. It was the kind of massive undertaking that would have been impossible for a young firm just 5 years ago. We need to be careful, Jennifer warned. This scale of project, this level of investment, if we compromise our principles to win it, we become what we fought against. Marcus nodded. The city wants the project done in 18 months. That timeline is only possible if we use exploitative labor practices and cut environmental corners. Then we tell them no, Maya said simply. We propose a 3-year timeline, fair wages, sustainable materials, and community input at every stage. If they reject that, we walk away. We could lose everything, Aisha pointed out, though her tone suggested she already knew Maya's response. We could lose our integrity, Maya countered. And that's the only thing we can't afford to lose. We built this firm on truth as foundation, remember? That's not just a motto. It's a commitment. The room fell silent, each partner weighing the risk. Then, one by one, they nodded agreement. 2 weeks later, the city accepted their proposal. The project would take longer and cost more, but it would be done right, ethically, sustainably, with the community as partners rather than subjects. The evening they signed the contract, Maya returned to Master Chen's dojo. The old Sifu was teaching a beginner class, patiently correcting stances and offering encouragement. Maya waited until the class ended, then approached him. Sifu, I wanted to thank you for everything you taught me. Not just the techniques, but the philosophy behind them. Master Chen smiled, his face creasing with warmth. You think I taught you to fight? I taught you to stand. You figured out the rest yourself. You taught me that violence is a last resort. That control is more powerful than force. That true strength is knowing when not to strike. And you taught others. Master Chin gestured to the departing students, several of whom wore Patel Design Collective t-shirts, interns and junior designers who joined the firm's Wing Chun training program. The cycle continues. You were taught, you learned, now you teach. This is how change becomes permanent. Maya bowed deeply to her teacher, holding the position for a long moment of profound respect. That night, she sat at her grandmother's kitchen table one more time. Nanny had grown frilier, her movements slower, but her mind remained sharp as ever. Tell me, Beta, Nanny said, pouring chai with steady hands. Are you happy? Maya considered the question carefully. I'm fulfilled, Nanny. I'm building things that matter, teaching people who need it, challenging systems that need changing. Is that the same as happy? It's better, Nanny replied. Happiness is fleeting. Fulfillment lasts. You found your purpose, not just in designing buildings, but in designing a better way of being in the world. That's what your grandfather and I dreamed of when we came to this country. Not wealth or fame, but the chance for our children and grandchildren to live with integrity and purpose. You gave me that foundation, Maya said, taking her grandmother's hands. Everything I built on what you and Master Chen and all my teachers gave me. And now you give it to others, Nanny smiled. That's the architecture of legacy, Beta. Not the buildings that bear your name, but the people you lift up, the systems you transform, the doors you hold open for those behind you. 10 years after the Sterling scandal, Maya Patel received the AIA Gold Medal, the highest honor in American architecture. At 42, she was the youngest recipient in the award's history and the first woman of color to receive it. She stood on the stage at the National Convention, the same conference where she'd given her first major speech a decade ago. The audience was larger now, more diverse, filled with faces that reflected the change she'd fought for. 10 years ago, Maya began, I stood in a ballroom with wine dripping from my hair, my work destroyed, facing people who wanted me erased from this profession. Today, I stand before you with this medal, leading a firm that's designed over 50 major projects, teaching the next generation of architects, and continuing to challenge the systems that tried to break me. She held up the gold medal, letting the light catch its surface. But this isn't my medal. It belongs to everyone who refused to stay silent when they saw injustice. It belongs to Jennifer Park, who risked everything to share evidence. To Alex Chen, who documented the truth when others tried to bury it. To Master Chen, who taught me that real power is control. To my grandmother, who taught me that dignity is non-negotiable. To every young architect who saw my story and decided they deserved space in this profession. The camera panned across the audience, capturing tears, nodding heads, and raised phones recording her words. I want to speak directly to the young people in this room, especially those from marginalized communities who are wondering if they belong here. Maya's voice strengthened. You belong. Not because of what I did or any other individual's fight. You belong because architecture needs your vision, your perspective, your unique understanding of space and community. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And to those in positions of power, the senior partners, the firm leaders, the gatekeepers, I want to be clear, the world has changed. The next generation won't tolerate the discrimination, exploitation, and abuse that previous generations endured. You can either adapt or become obsolete. The choice is yours. She set down the medal and stepped forward to the edge of the stage. 10 years ago, I was a quiet architect that everyone underestimated. They thought my silence was weakness. My composure was fear. My dignity was submission. They were wrong. And every time someone underestimates someone like me, like us, they're wrong. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. But what Maya remembered most wasn't the applause or the award. It was the young woman who approached her afterward, a black teenager with intricate braids and bright eyes, holding an architecture portfolio. Miss Patel, the girl said nervously. I'm Imani. I'm starting at MIT next fall, studying architecture. I just wanted to say. I'm here because of you. Because you showed me it was possible. Maya smiled, placing a hand on Imani's shoulder. You're here because you earned it, Imani. Because you have talent and vision and determination. I just held the door open. Now it's your turn to keep it open for whoever comes after you. I will, Imani promised. I absolutely will. As Maya watched Imani disappear into the crowd, portfolio clutched to her chest like precious cargo, she thought about Master Chen's words from years ago. The cycle continues. You were taught, you learned, now you teach. The door she'd fought to open was still open. And getting wider every day. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the convention center, thousands of architects of every background, sharing ideas, challenging norms, building the future together. She sent it to her team's group chat with a simple caption, "This is what victory looks like." Not me. Us. The responses came immediately: celebration emojis, proud messages, photos of the team watching her speech on the live stream. They'd built something together that couldn't be torn down by bigotry or corruption or fear. They'd built truth on a strong foundation. And it would stand.